Good evening, it's Pastor Mary. It is, Tuesday, April 5th. And we have had a lot of rain here. It's been quite the weather. I didn't put anything up that I was doing devotions tonight, but hopefully those who join me regularly will see that I'm on. I know some of you watch me later, and I know some of you watch me in the morning or early morning, whichever you may be. So I'm going to put a little note up on Facebook now on my page just to say, come join me. Let's see. Devotions. Hey Cheryl, how are you? Good evening. Good evening, good evening. How's the weather there? How are things going? Do you know? I know my girlfriend said a lot of bad weather coming in, things like that. How are you? How's church? I know you're getting ready for Holy Week. We are too. So, wet, chilly, and damp. Yes. Oh, you're well. Yes, it is. We've had a lot of rain today. But we made it through, and then now we're going to, I think tonight we're okay, but it's tomorrow evening that another bad storm's coming in, and we may have high winds tonight too. But yes, it started raining right when I left my house this morning about 9:30. It was really raining hard. It started raining, but it wasn't a bad trip, so I'm really glad for that. So, yes, overbooked Holy Week. Well, get this, Cheryl. I don't know if I said this on here. You may have heard me say, but Christopher's prom is Saturday night before Easter. So we went and got him fitted for a tux last week. He's going with his friends from his classes. They're going in a limo. And we will take him over on that Saturday after we've had, both our churches will have Easter egg hunts and all kinds of things to prepare for. And both of our churches have, David's church has a sunrise at 6:30, and we have an Easter vigil at 6. And I live 45 minutes from church, but I'm not going out there till that morning because I want to be home. I want to be there when Christopher comes home from prom. I want to hear all about his night because he loves to dance. So I'm sure he's excited to get to go. So anyway, so yeah, and I said I'm really grateful for this week because it gives some time to get things done, to get things ready. And Wednesday, some of us are putting together Easter baskets for kids. Hey, Karen, good evening. Easter baskets for kids who get the Backpack for Kids program at the school that we sponsor. So I've got all the stuff today for that. So we'll be taking Easter baskets over tomorrow afternoon that can go home with them because they're on spring. My kids are on spring break this week, but hang on, go get Samuel. I'm on TV. You're gonna have to go get Samuel because Dad's gone. Sorry.
I'll talk, please.
Make sure Samuel heard you. Sorry. That's life when you're at home. So let's see. Well, thanks, Karen. I wanted to do something for him this year. So I went and got everything today. They have nice felt. They're like a heavy duty felt that are real cute at Aldi's for $2.50. They're really, really adorable. So I got those there. I got some candy there. Then I went to the Dollar Tree and got stuff there. So the kids will all have a variety of things in their basket so they can take them home and have them for Easter. So it's just, what kid doesn't want an Easter basket? And, if they can't afford food on the weekends, they're not, maybe they'll get an Easter basket somewhere, but maybe they won't. And we just want to make sure that they have an Easter basket that they can enjoy for Easter too. So maybe I'll put a little invitation into our Easter egg hunt. That's an idea. Hey, Janet Kindred, how are you? Glad you're on here. So anyway, yes, Cheryl, the busyness, Palm Sunday, which I really love. But I love it all. I especially love Good Friday. You know what's so good about Good Friday. So, and we will have services at noon and at 7 p.m. Good evening, Janet. I'm so glad you're with us. I have a few prayer requests, but I'll wait to share them. So I said, you know, I was reading some of the introduction in this book, Jesus, a Pilgrimage, by James Martin. He's a Jesuit, and I'm really enjoying the book. Of course, you know, a book person like me, I'm reading 3 or 4 books at a time, and I was reading some more of this when I got home today, and then I was reading our book group book, which is The Choice, Embrace the Possible, by Dr. Edith Eva Eger. I just want to share something about this because it's really making me even more think about what's going on in Ukraine. Dr. Edith survived the Holocaust. And the first part of the book is the story of her family and their life together, and then that they were taken to the camps, and the story of her and her one sister that were together. And we are at the point where they've been released, but they're in such bad shape. I mean, it's just heartache to read it. And to know, we were talking about this today. We have a centering prayer group that meets on Tuesday mornings, and then we have a theology on tap. And we're reading different books in both of them. And we were talking about, you know, I said Sunday how hard it is to leave the news on, and yet I know it's important to watch. And just that we have to not only pray, but if we could find ways to either offer support to people who are going through the horribleness, just the atrocities. To watch and to listen to the stories. And one of the things that, if you're a person that puts anything up on Facebook or Instagram or anything else, I would like to encourage you to continue to put things up that you see, that you know show what's going on in Ukraine, or praying for peace for Ukraine. President Zelensky had a message on Sunday night on the Grammy Awards. We had him on, and I didn't get to hear the whole thing because we play games with our friends on our computers on Sunday night. Like, we pull it up and they could see us and we could see them, and we have the same board game set up. We started that during COVID, and we continue to do that, and it's really good. We love it. But anyway, I heard some of what he said the next day, and part of what he said, April, good evening. Part of what President Zelensky said is it's really important to them that people in America keep sharing the stories of what is really happening in Ukraine, to fight against all the disinformation that's coming out of Russia that's covered up, making it look like it's real people sharing it who are not on. And so I shared one tonight from a colleague of mine, Lenny Westfall. Now, Lanny and I don't know if we've ever met in person, but he had been an interim pastor in Bloomington, Illinois, and he's the ELCA pastor, and I think I asked him to be friends a couple years ago, and he now serves at a Lutheran church. I think it's St. Mark's Lutheran, Washington, Illinois, which is close to Peoria. Anyway, I've put up some things before, but I put up something else tonight because his sister actually lives in Ukraine and married a Ukrainian man who's a farmer, and he shares with us things from his sister from time to time, and thank God they are still safe. They are still on their farm. His sister loves speaking Russian, and earlier on he shared the story of her learning Russian and then becoming a translator and living in Russia and then going to Ukraine, where she met her husband. Anyway, the story tonight was very moving. So I shared that on my Facebook page tonight about dolls made in Ukraine that have a cross. Instead of having like eyes and a nose and a mouth, they have a cross stitched into them. So I would encourage you to look at it, and if you want to share that story, share that story. But that was one of the things we can do. We can share stories from Ukraine or from people we know with Ukraine who we know, that are legitimate stories to keep the story, because he was saying, and I agree, just there's so much other stuff that wants to take our attention away from it. And like everything with the Academy Awards, even if you didn't watch them, everybody knows about it. And yes, it was awful, and yes, it shouldn't have happened, and maybe the joke shouldn't have been said. I won't get into the whole thing, about that, but that has taken up so much time. A friend of mine wrote and said, she said, I'm so sick of hearing about it and talking about it. And she said, we need to be talking about Ukraine, and we need to be praying for the people of Ukraine. And I said, yes, and I just want to lift that up. I know you all are thinking of it, but I want to continue to encourage us. And tonight I heard a really great story on CBS News. I caught the end, and if I can find it, I will put it up. 2 young men who go to college, Ivy League, I think, or Harvard, I think. But anyway, they had gone to a peace march about Ukraine, and the one young man was so moved, and he's in technology, that he recruited a guy he was friends with, and they were able to set up a website where people who were leaving Ukraine, who needed a place to stay, and then people who had offered places for people to stay, they made a website and made it safe so that people who were escaping what was happening in Ukraine could get on there safely and then be connected with all these different places. Kind of like when you sign up, if you've ever done Airbnb, or you book a hotel and you look at the room and you book it like that, but for free. And they showed a family, a mother, her sister, and their daughters. And there was a family who had a home in Paris, France, and they are staying there through the summer. And because of the website they made, they were able to connect them. And I thought, wow, that is really amazing. And those are the kind of things that give us hope in the midst of such sorrow and grief. It seems to be getting worse. And it's heartbreaking. But we can't give up, and we need to keep praying, and we need to keep good things and things that Ukrainians are asking us to share in front of people, and lifting them up and finding ways, if we can, to be part of the solution, that this will end, and that we pray it will end soon, and that the bloodshed will stop. So, okay, so Jesus tonight. I want to read you a little bit. So the part that I'm earlier on in the book, and he has gone to, let's see. So as I shared when he shared before, he's going to share from different stories of Scripture, and then going to those places that are associated with it in Israel or in Palestine. And so let's see. So there's a story about Mary, and the angel coming to her and to Elizabeth, and talking about Mary going to Elizabeth and finding out that Elizabeth was also pregnant with child, and the gift of that, and that the angel told Mary a secret, that Elizabeth was pregnant. And so he says this: frequently I meet people struggling with devastating news. During those times, even the most devout can begin to question God's presence, because he was saying that Mary might have doubted what the angel was saying to her, and the angel gave her this word of good news, that God had blessed Elizabeth to have a child. So during those times, even the most devout can begin to doubt God's presence. But often what helps them to regain trust is a simple question: has God been with you in difficult times in the past? How would you answer that? Yes, God has definitely been with me in difficult times in the past, has been with my family, has been with my friends, has seen us through the worst of times. And then in the same way that the angel reorients Mary by pointing to what has already happened, that is Elizabeth being pregnant, a friend can invite us to remember. Were there times in the past, a friend might ask, when you felt like things were confusing, or where you can now see God's hand? And often we will pause and say, now that you mention it, when I thought I couldn't possibly go on, I found that something or someone helped me to face my difficulties. God was with me. He says, memories of God's activity in the past enables us to embrace the future. So talking about the story of Mary. So, and then he says on the next page, when we say yes to God, we are usually surprised by the results. We say I do during a wedding and receive blessings far beyond what we could have imagined. We accept a position as a teacher and our lives are changed by our students. More simply, we say yes to God and are completely transformed. So I love that. So then he goes on to talk about the Gospels and the differences, and John is really different, as you know, from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They're all considered the synoptic Gospels, and their stories follow pretty closely together. So then he asked the question from Luke because of the Annunciation and the angel coming to proclaim the good news that she was to bear Jesus. And so he asked this question: is it possible to believe that this event, the Annunciation, could have happened just as Luke describes it? Let me be clear. Yes, God can do anything. If God can create the universe from nothing, then causing a young woman to become pregnant in a miraculous way seems a small thing. The modern mind may have a hard time believing in the miraculous, but such belief lies at the heart of the Gospels. I think I read this last week, actually. So a miraculous pregnancy is not beyond God. All right, so then I go on to Jesus' birth. And he talks about going to the places. There are several places where the Church of the Nativity is. Now, I have not been to Israel. I really want to go to Israel. I know Cheryl's pastor just went to Israel. But I do know some things about some of the sites in Israel because of my studies and my readings and everything. And the Church of the Nativity is one of those sites that it's owned by, I think, at least 3 different groups of Christian groups that don't always get along. In fact, they caught it on video a few years ago where, if you can believe this, there was a dust-up, and I mean a dust-up, a fight, in there between 2 of the groups that ran different parts of it, which I was like, are you kidding me? What would God think of that? Just absolutely ridiculous behavior. I just couldn't believe it. But anyway, so he talks about him and his friend going there to see it. But when they get taken, the gentleman who's driving them, the cab driver, he says they went in his cab. He's a friendly Palestinian man, short of stature, whom I call Aziz. Aziz was garrulous and helpful, but also slightly pushy. Not surprising for someone supporting his family on a taxi cab driver's income. Although George and I told Aziz that we most wanted to see the Church of the Nativity in Shepherd's Field, where it's claimed that an angel announced the birth of the Messiah, Aziz insisted that there were many other places that thereby close that were worth a visit. Well worth it, he said. As anyone who has traveled abroad, or at home for that matter, will tell you, there is no little danger involved in entrusting yourself to an eager cab driver. But George and I were in an adventurous mood. First, we go to the Shepherd's Field, he said. His cab raced through the narrow streets of Bethlehem and in a few minutes deposited us at the entrance of Shepherd's Field. As you should not be surprised, especially after what I told you about the Church of the Holy Nativity, there are 2 Shepherd's Fields, one run by the Greek Orthodox Church, the other by the Franciscans. Correctly intuiting that we were not Orthodox, Aziz had driven us to the second locale. Shepherd's Field was not what I had imagined, that is, rolling green hills where friendly shepherds grazed their fluffy white sheep, who bleated cutely before a picturesque view of the little town of Bethlehem. That's what comes from seeing too many Christmas cards. I love that. Today's Shepherd's Field boasts an impressive garden with tall palm trees and flowering bushes. Down a hill, the tumble-down ruins of a small Byzantine-era church perch on a parched promontory overlooking the dusty plains surrounding Bethlehem. Amid the ruins are an altar and a few metal benches which make up a simple chapel for pilgrims. There were no sheep. On this day, a few feet away, archaeological digs were covered with metal roofs. Was this where shepherds watched their flocks by night, as Christmas carolers would have it? In his guidebook, Murphy O'Connor concludes that any historical significance of the location is unlikely, though the church was built on a site occupied by nomadic shepherds in the 1st century. As we stood on the windswept bluff overlooking the city, the sun running down heat, I thought, well, you never know. In fact, Drew, his friend, had told me that one of his happiest memories from his many visits to the Holy Land was watching, from the vantage point of Shepherd's Field, a shepherd led a mixed flock of goats and sheep down the opposite hill, past an Israeli settlement then being built, and away into the Judean wilderness. So then they went to Manger Square. So then it talks about the story in Luke of the Manger Square, and he explains some things about it, about what a manger was. Let me see. Trying to think if I had. The word manger comes from the French verb to eat, and is simply the wooden stand that holds animal feed. The one who will feed the crowds in the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, who will call himself the bread of life, is born in a manger. But there's potentially more interesting word in this passage. The word used in most Christmas pageants, inn, is the original Greek kataluma, which can also be translated as a guest room or lodging area. So we might envision a room in a house or even an open space where travelers lodged. Thus, some scholars suggest this interpretation. Since there was no room in the guest room, the baby was placed in a manger in another part of a house, most likely the ground floor, where animals were typically kept. Perhaps then the familiar image of the manger in a wooden stable is inaccurate. Either way, as New Testament scholar Luke Timothy Johnson, who I know personally because he was one of my husband's professors and he's fabulous, notes, the transient condition of the parents is clear. Raymond E. Brown emphasizes in his massive book, The Birth of the Messiah, perhaps the most extensive study on the topic. The gospel image of the manger has less to do with poverty and more to do with the peculiarity of location caused by circumstances, meaning that they had to travel for the census and be there, and that's when Mary was pregnant and the birth took place. So then he talks about this Church of the Nativity. It's a squat, buff-colored, fortress-like edifice built on the site of the 4th century church mentioned by St. Jerome. Its Byzantine history is summed up by the physical appearance of the church's main entrance, which clearly shows 3 stages of development. And you know, I'll try to go look for a picture to show you on Thursday night. That is, the doorway was made progressively smaller and more difficult to enter, and the outlines of the larger, more ancient doors can easily be seen. Visitors can discern first a large 6th century opening, which is a wooden lintel is still embedded, it says, in the church wall. Second, a smaller archway fashioned by the Crusaders, and finally, an even smaller entrance from the Turkish and Ottoman periods, which was designed to prevent looters from entering the church with ease. Today, the entrance to the great church is a 3-foot-high doorway, which means all of us, pretty much that watches this, would all have to squat down or bend down enough to get through the door. Thus, he says, to enter the Church of the Nativity, one must bow or kneel. As a result, the paving stone has been worn smooth, with a marked indentation made by millions of pilgrims. Strangely, I found this entrance, called the Door of Humility, more moving than the church's interior. As I entered the building on my knees, I thought not only of how God has lowered himself to enter into our humanity, but also more specifically how Jesus has lowered himself so much that he assented to be crucified. I don't know why I didn't highlight that. I think that is really amazing. That he thought of not only how God lowered himself to enter into our humanity, but more specifically how Jesus lowered himself so much that he assented to be crucified. So then he says the long, high-ceilinged interior was jammed with people. The Church of the Nativity, with smooth stone floor and timbered roof supported by massive columns, appeared dilapidated. Its walls and woodwork were dusty, understandable for a building dating from the 6th century. But knowing that the structure dated back to the time of the Emperor Justinian, imbued the gritty setting with a meaning that transcended the grime. I couldn't wait to see the actual spot where Jesus was born. I anticipated being deeply moved, but where was it? We made our way through the crowds and inched forward in an ill-defined line with hundreds of tourists. Soon George, his friend, got antsy, bothered by the crush. I'll see you later. Then he said, I was already finding a spiritual challenge to maintain a reverent attitude while being elbowed every few seconds by my fellow pilgrims. Gradually, the throng carried me like a twig in a river to the main altar in the upper church. In a few minutes, the crush grew more intense as people spied our target, a narrow archway behind the main altar. Trying not to step on toes, I gingerly walked down a shallow stone staircase, squeezed my way through the arch, and was in the Nativity Grotto. The Nativity Grotto was the only place where one of my original objections to visiting the Holy Land, the touristy sites would turn me off, proved justified. The crowd squished itself around two spots, with nearly everyone snapping photos or filming videos. The first, to the immediate right, was the traditional site of the birth of Jesus. Behind a small arch were the remains of a cave. Under an altar that stands in the front of the cave is the holy site, marked by a large silver star affixed to the stone floor and illumined by several hanging lanterns. I knelt down to kiss the cold stone and said a prayer. A few feet away is the chapel of the manger, where by tradition Mary laid her baby. I kissed the spot as well and prayed for my family, my mother, my sister, my brother-in-law, my two nephews. Upon rising, I was immediately surrounded by pilgrims talking loudly, snapping photos, taking videos, gesticulating, no, that's not right, wildly, jostling one another and reaching into crinkly plastic bags for a water bottle or a candy bar. Over the years, I visited many other crowded religious sites. Lourdes, for one, that is in France. It is a site where Mary was to have appeared to two children, but had never found it so difficult to pray. Why? Perhaps nowhere else did the visitors seem so blasé as they did at the nativity sites. Maybe it was just this particular crowd on this particular day, but most people were strolling around and chatting as if it were Disneyland. I wanted to say, wait a minute, remember where you are. On the other hand, who knows what was going on inside of them? Fortunately, the rest of the Holy Land was infinitely more prayerful. When I stepped back into the cavernous interior of the church, I found myself confused. This ancient holy place, where Christian pilgrims had come to pray for millennia, where I had expected to be moved to tears, left me cold. I spied George sitting in a pew by himself. With his eye for the bazaar, he pointed out something hanging from the church's ornate chandeliers. Apparently, in keeping with Western tradition, they were hung with garish red Christmas ornaments. Ho, 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 he said. I laughed aloud, but couldn't stop thinking about this confusing place, at once holy and off-putting. So that's, I've only been to Europe once. I've been to Canada, I've been to Mexico, I've been to the Caribbean, I've been to Haiti, I've been all over the country. I've been to Hawaii, but I've only been to Europe once. I've never been to other continents. And David and I, when I was pregnant with Christopher, already had a trip planned when we found out I was pregnant with Christopher. And I told our doctor I wouldn't go. It was my 5th pregnancy. I'd had 4 miscarriages. And the doctor kept saying, no, you'll be fine, go to Paris. We went, we had a great time. Although I was sicker than a dog after the 4th day there, and lost 8 pounds and couldn't eat in a restaurant the whole time because I was so pregnant and I had to cover my face with my scarf. It was in early November we went. When we rode the train, because the smells just made me want to throw up right on the train. But I had morning sickness really, really bad. Anyway, but we got to go to Notre Dame, and we also went to Sacré-Cœur, and we also went to Sainte-Chapelle, which are they're all three. Well, Sacré-Cœur and Notre Dame are both large cathedral. Well, Notre Dame is a cathedral. I don't know that Sacré-Cœur is a cathedral. And Sainte-Chapelle was a private chapel built by either a king or a prince in their home. And you had to go upstairs to go in it. but all three of the places were so awe-inspiring. I will say Notre Dame was very dark, but it was just, and it was quiet, and people were softly talking. I remember, I think Mass was going on when we had gone in. I don't remember people being loud and garish and crazy, because they knew they were in places that were holy and were places, houses of worship. I will say that San Chapelle, our doctor was the one that told us to go there. And David loves it. I mean, I loved it too. And it has the rose window, so it's the big, stained glass, and it looks like a rose. And all the windows in there were, the stained glass rose was stories of the book of Revelation, which is what David wrote his dissertation on. And it's just gorgeous. I mean, there's nothing, when we were there, so Christopher's going to be 22 in June, and I was pregnant with him. So it was 22 years last November that we went. There was no furniture in the place, nothing. You just went up in there and you looked all around. But to think about these places, I've been to some beautiful cathedrals in America, all over the country, D.C. and St. Louis has the old cathedral. It's beautiful, and there's another beautiful cathedral in St. Louis that I've been to in my life. I've been to others, beautiful churches. I've been to some gorgeous churches. There's one in Gainesville, Florida. It's at an Episcopal retreat. I did a retreat there once with college students, and it is all wood and glass. It's like there's this chapel in Arkansas that I want to go to, and it's like that too. And it was just absolutely gorgeous. The whole thing was made of glass and big timber, and just the whole thing. And just, you could see everything outside. That was the beauty of the place. And I just, I can't imagine when he writes that, to think that people would go into such a holy site and act like ugly tourists. And I'm not saying American, because they're from all over the world, and I guess in some ways I'm surprised that the people that run the place don't limit the number of people in there and keep it a little bit holier. It's really interesting to read that, to think of the reality of that, and I don't know if it's like that or not. Like I said, I haven't been, but I certainly want to go. And my brother's been to Israel, and Cheryl, your pastor, just came back from Israel, so you'll have to ask her about that. But yes, it is time for book study. You are right. We got just a couple minutes. Thank you, Karen. Just two prayer requests. Please pray for Charlie, Connie's husband. He was supposed to move to a rehab place today, but he had some issues again, so he wasn't able to move. So please pray for him to get better and well enough to be able to go to a rehab center. And what was the other thing? Pray for Miss April and her health. We'll pray for Ukraine. Pray for peace to come. Pray for my cousin Jeannie and her grandson Gabe, and we're thankful that he's getting to go home. They've been through a lot, and just pray for Gabe's continued recovery and Jeannie's health, so she can continue to take care of him and give him good love. Those are the prayer requests I could think of tonight. I'll write down the others. Tomorrow night we'll be on at 6:30 with Wednesday night devotions. You are welcome, if you're in the area, to come for dinner at 5:45. I am making minestrone soup. Cheryl Maples is making another soup, and we'll have sandwiches. So please come and have dinner with us, 5:45. Worship at 6:30. I'll be back with devotions on Thursday night here at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Until then, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks. I got book group. Got to go. Take care. Have a good night and a great